Welcome back to the Health Tech Edge. Today, I'm joined by someone who's been on the show many times before and who I have the pleasure of working with every day on AI in healthcare. I'm here with Raheel Retiwalla. He's the co-founder and chief product officer at Boost Health AI and also serves as chief strategy officer at Productive Edge. Raheel spent his career at the intersection of product, data, and healthcare operations. He started in consulting and product management at Microsoft, learning what it takes to scale platforms and turn information into dependable products. For the past 8 years, he's been helping payers and health systems tackle some of the tougher problems in healthcare, reducing operating expenses, managing medical and pharmacy costs, and improving financial resilience. He's built a reputation for turning analytics and AI into actual execution inside the workflows that matter. Today, we're talking about Boost Health AI, a new offering for healthcare payers. We'll get into how the Boost AI Foundry works and how it comes together as part of an AI healthcare factory that supports payers in producing and scaling AI without constant reinvention. Raheel, good to have you back.
Mike, good to be speaking with you again on the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to have you, and thanks for spending a few minutes with us. I think since you launched Boost a couple of months ago now, it's good to kind of bring the story together and share it with the audience about what you've been working on and what the early feedback has been. So let's talk about this introduction of Boost Health AI. What's the problem that you're trying to solve for healthcare payers with Boost?
I think if you kind of look at the macro problem that we're trying to solve is really the issue of bringing some level of efficiency to the administrative burden that plagues the healthcare system in the United States. So if you go back about four or 5 years ago, where JAMA and McKinsey released their article on the $500 billion waste in the U.S. healthcare system, largely in the administrative waste, and then essentially outlined exactly what areas that contribute towards that waste, specifically functional areas. It was an eye-opening sort of experience for us, just kind of thinking through that, and of course witnessing that in our own client base. Then combining that with post-COVID, where margin pressures continue to be quite strong for payers, both national payers as well as regional nonprofit payers. And it's not that one of the other things that really came to us was that working with our clients on many digital transformation initiatives, it wasn't that organizations weren't trying to address ideas like shifting to a member-centric approach, becoming more really embracing design thinking, or upgrading and migrating to the cloud, or rethinking provider contract negotiations. It was like everything generally was being tried, yet here we are, and the margins are still under pressure, and there's still significant inefficiencies. So for us at Boost, it was really, really acknowledging that it is fundamentally the issue of inefficiencies and the coordination expense of transitions of care, of managing the utilization management, the care management, the population health, the handoffs between teams that it takes to be more efficient at doing what needs to be done and just running the business is where there are opportunities. So we've taken a stance at Boost Health AI, that we need to be contributing to solving that problem. And that's the genesis of Boost, essentially.
So you wear these two hats, right? Chief strategy officer at Productive Edge, a services technology company, then the decision to create Boost Health AI, that reaction to the huge opportunity, of course, in the market of where payers need help, as you're saying. But how is Boost different than Productive Edge in terms of what it offers?
Yeah, I think so. Productive Edge, as you said, is really more of a strategy technology consulting company, and we work with our clients very much as a consulting company experience would be for our clients, but except we blend strategy, engineering, and managed services together in a very healthcare centric way. One of the things that Productive Edge we started offering as part of our services portfolio was the concept of accelerators, that essentially packaged as services that can get to outcomes faster. And that's really the differentiation for Productive Edge, is that we don't spend months and months and months in strategy before we can do anything. We have a very strong model as to how rapidly we can execute on strategy, get into, the 10,000 foot level where, product is being built. So that's That's productive edge. But when we looked at our accelerators, we kind of take a step back, and when we combined it with where the administrative burden issues that I was referring to, we recognized that there are some common fundamental themes that drive those inefficiencies. And one of the common themes across all payers is that, when you look at the entire journey of the way the payers do what they need to do, run the operations, whether it's intaking a prior authorization request, or making a decision on that prior authorization request, or defining the service plan for a member, or managing the care for a member, or defining the engagement for a member, or supporting the member. You look at the entire journey. At every moment in that journey, the staff needs to evaluate certain rules. So during prior authorization, it's about what are the policies say? What does the clinical guidelines say? During a clinical review, it's like, again, what does the policy say? If you look at from a service plan creation or care management, does the policy allow us to do that? So every team essentially needs to understand and utilize these rules as they do what they need to do. And every team essentially is interpreting these rules in their own way to essentially do and deliver on the task that they need to do, and managing those rules in their own way. The problem is that creates, first of all, inconsistencies in the answer. And more importantly, things don't add up. So teams are always going back and forth saying, well, is this really the way it works? Or is that really the way it works? So that's where we feel the inefficiencies were stemming from to begin with. And rather than focusing on services accelerator that can kind of surround that, we decided to package those accelerators as true modular agents that specialize in unlocking these document types. So these document types include things like medical policies, they include things like authorization guidelines, benefit documents, explanation of coverage documents, contracts, clinical charts, all of these things that are essentially needed by teams to successfully, accurately be able to deliver the service to the member. And we are focused on essentially unlocking them so that there's a source of truth for those within the entire organization. Every team can tap into those rules and utilize them in a consistent way. So for me and for us at Boost, it was really realizing that, hey, it all stems from, that inefficiency stems from the amount of time it takes for teams to really understand what those rules mean, how that applies to that particular member's situation, who they're speaking with at that moment, and how comfortable and confident they are in the way they can actually deliver the service to the member.
Yeah, and I think there's some recognition in there, obviously, that every payer is different in how they conduct their operations and what their existing technology stack and investments must look like. But there are those common themes that really govern a lot of how healthcare is paid for, which comes back to that policy, right? So like you and I, we have our employer provided health plan. It specifies a certain coverage. We had a couple of different plans to choose from, just like everyone who participates in the employer sponsored plans. Obviously, there are public healthcare plans, Medicare and Medicaid, that people may be participating in, but all of that coming back inside the organization of any given payer and how they implement and how they execute on that. There are some elements that can be standardized or at least built into a framework. And I'll use that as kind of a transition, I guess, to talk about this AI Foundry concept that you're using as you talk about Boost with customers and prospects. So tell us a little bit more about the Foundry and what that opportunity provides as so many healthcare payers look to try to scale AI operations in the next couple of years.
Yeah. So the Foundry is a concept that, we created that essentially addresses what are the building blocks that you would need to deliver on just completely rewiring the workflows in a way that they're more intelligent, they are more efficient, they're more productive, and they're focused on outcomes, right? So in the Foundry, we start with those, what we call solution blueprints. So we've taken a step back and we've looked at about 9 different workflows and 9 different functional areas of payers. So everything from utilization management to care management, to claims adjudication, to underwriting, to management, to member services, to provider network management, various things, operations that are affected by these workflows and tasks and unlocking of those rules. And we've identified over 60 plus use cases that really translate to the specific workflows and tasks that people need to do. And at those moments where they have to make those decisions, that can benefit from an unlocked rule. So we start there, and that's a corpus of blueprints and solutions that we've pre-thought of. The second is then a set of modular agents that focus on things like extraction. So all the document types that I mentioned to you earlier, Mike, we've spent a lot of energy building agents that can extract the rules from those documents. A lot of times these documents really are PDFs and they're locked in some document repository. So we're focused on unlocking that into making those available as human readable as well as machine readable information. Along with these, extractors, we also provide some other types of agents that bring value to the workflow. So whether it might be agents that are good at explaining what the extraction means, or a agent that can extract and understand data from a fire package, for example. These are types of agents that essentially build and enable become the building blocks. And then lastly is this idea of decision pack. So decision pack fundamentally says that at any given moment, when you look at these workflows and tasks, it is a question that needs to be answered. So we are very clear about what kinds of answers are available through those agents that are connected to those blueprints and those use cases. And then what is the method from an API perspective, let's say, that will be accessible? And then essentially, how are we going to explain how the agent derived the answer? So it's completely explainable and reasonable and has a reason to it. And then lastly, there's telemetry that's involved so that we can understand things like drift and usage and exactly the needs from an auditing and compliance perspective. So the Foundry essentially offers those building blocks that are tailored and connected to potential use cases that you can jumpstart today and start, driving efficiencies in your organizations.
I know that many payer organizations, just like companies in every industry, are experimenting with AI and doing pilots in various areas of the business. I know that you're advocating a more centralized model, right? Essentially building out what you refer to as an AI factory, of which the Foundry is part of that, right? To kind of establish a larger framework to do this. And, I think there's a study that came out this year from MIT saying 95% of AI pilots fail. And then there was a competing study that came out with a different percentage, but we all know there's a certain percentage of things that fail. They don't go beyond pilot stage, or they never really kind of get off the ground at scale and drive wide adoption. Can you talk to us about this factory model and how that complements the Foundry, and how ultimately this helps go back to solve some of the problems that you started with around driving scalable AI cost-saving initiatives within an organization?
So, Mike, when you think about the Foundry as those modular components and those decision packs aligned to use cases, think of the factory as the execution engine that successfully, consistently is able to drive the agents for very specific use cases. That's what the factory model does. And the reason why we came up with that factory model at Productive Edge is because there is a method through which we successfully drive AI project success. For example, many clients start with a very valid question, which is, where should we begin? What are our primary use cases? How should we prioritize them? And then, how do we begin? And that's been a question, since AI became a force where you had to have some level of thinking around that. So people started there. From a factory perspective, because we've done many of these already, we realized that it is important to begin with a framework, working with our clients, helping them establish, what is the risk model of a particular use case, and what is the governance that is needed to support that level of risk. And then once you have that defined, you can then do things like build, let's say using our Foundry, where clients, instead of just saying, give me a use case, we're actually saying, fundamentally, we're connecting use cases to document types. So if you unlock document type X, here's the universe of use cases that open up to you with varying degrees of risk. And where at the moment where we are in your journey from an AI application of AI perspective, we can then identify, based on the desired outcomes, the ROI, what's value to you, what are the top 2, 3, 4 use cases, which document type needs to be unlocked, and therefore begin the intake and prep process for those to validate that there is going to be an ROI, bring the alignment within the organization to do that, and then essentially go through the process of picking up the work that we've done as accelerators in our foundry, and then use those to accelerate the development of the agents, but more importantly, the operationalizing of that within the specific use case and the application or the experience, so that it actually sees the end of day. I mean, it sees the beginning of the light, right? So that's where we bring it. So that's the factory model. Essentially, it starts building those use case matrices that help us see, if I go with this particular use case, this doc type, what are the matrix of use cases that open up because of that? And then as I go do more of those, I have a significant opportunity to really go after those very complex use cases that are the brunt of why I have such a huge administrative expense. And it's a journey that you can get on, but essentially the factory allows you to receive value from month 3, let's
Mhm.
say, onwards, and there's a virtuous cycle of value that emerges. And as your teams become good at becoming great product teams, where they can embrace AI and use these models and use these agents to infuse their own products, that's where the multiplier effect comes in, right? So that's where we're aiming for. I think starting from the document types has given us an anchor to be able to really look at what are those functional operational areas that can be affected in the way that we imagine AI can affect, right?
Yeah, and I think that's been the most eye-opening piece, even for me. We've both been in the tech industry for a long time, and it's so common to start customer conversations around use cases, like, well, what are you trying to do, or what would you like to accomplish, and using that as the orientation. I think the document type conversation, it just changes the nature of the conversation with the payer organization to start them from a different place, because what you realize is by unlocking that document type, you may now have 10 use cases that can be lit up because of a document type, especially where you say things like the policy in a health plan is such a foundational piece of information.
Right.
But if it's locked in a PDF in text that most people would say, like, oh, to make that turn into computer logic, you put it in a business rules engine, and like at some level that works. But for these AI powered application scenarios and trying to take a leapfrog in terms of the generation of technology, it's there's more needed to kind of build around that. So I think the document type conversation is really a fascinating one. Can you give us an example or two of kind of how this comes together in practice with the factory and the foundry and this approach around document types? Like, what's a real example? You don't have to obviously name any customers, but maybe give us a scenario or two of some of the early wins that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, so I would say medical policies, of course, are an important driver and the initiator of this discussion. So with multiple clients, we've started, and the question really is, what is that use case that aligns with the right risk appetite plus the outcome appetite, right? And the ability to execute. So that's where we do the initial work in the factory. We've had a chance to work with multiple clients in the medical policy space, but there's another area which is in the standard operating procedure space, which is also very important because people spend a lot of time thinking about, well, in my state, what is the rule? What is the Medicaid rule? What is the process I use to go do something? And this is, again, it takes time for people to figure that out, and it's just something they don't necessarily should be doing if there was an assistant to them that can assist them through that process. And assistants can come in various ways, right? It doesn't always have to be a chatbot. It could be a form filler that can assist me as I'm filling my form out, for example. So that's been a very common use case. I think where we're branching now with early wins is our clients are seeing the document type concept as a way that they can anchor their thinking around. So now we're building those, sort of interconnected use cases. And with many clients, we're thinking about, the factory model as to how that factory model becomes a cornerstone of them like really thinking about transformation in a way that, even surpasses the way we thought about digital based transformation. Because here you're talking fundamental rewiring of an operation. You're not just digitally transforming an existing process, right? So there's elements to that as well that are emerging. And personally, I'm very excited about that as well.
Yeah, and I think the part of this is looking at the risk and the governance and the observability elements of it. This is obviously very, healthcare in general. I think I've heard this citation. I don't know what the source is, but saying that 4 out of 5 Americans are dissatisfied with their health, experience in the United States, right? So they have, obviously their health plan, their provider, there's dissatisfaction on both sides of it. So I think, the patient and member experience is a clear focus for many of these organizations, providing good, useful information and results and answers that can stand up to scrutiny is an important piece too, and not designing for that after the fact, I think is obviously a key element. And looking at kind of the type of information that's involved. Sometimes, we'll talk about, private health information or personally identifiable information, PHI, PII kind of sources, right? Like sometimes we're not even dealing with that kind of information. It's more like you said, standard operating procedures, right? I call a health plan. I use a CPAP because I have sleep apnea. I'm just trying to get more supplies. How can I get that? And 20 minutes later, I'm hanging up the phone because I never got the answer. They send me some documents via email afterwards that still don't answer my question, and I'm left with no help in that scenario, right? So very frustrating and common experience, and that's and that's a real example from my own life. But that's just a simple kind of everyday thing that happens. We see a huge amount of turnover in staff, right, in those customer service roles in health plans, where especially where the rules vary by state, as you mentioned, they may not have that expertise and the history to know, oh, it's different, if the member is in this state versus a different one. How do we serve people across multiple geographies, multiple policies, multiple plans, a lot of complexities. Anything we can do to streamline all of that and using technology is a key piece. So we've got kind of the factory, we've got the foundry, we've got the operations up and running. Just to play devil's advocate for a moment, why would someone do something like using the factory foundry approach? Why wouldn't they, with all the great cloud providers and technology and data platforms out there, just kind of go build it themselves? Or go with a fully outsourced solution and use something, from some of the application vendors in this space. Where do you see kind of Boost fitting, and what are some of the key differences you see?
Yeah, I think you look at our model with Boost is we're not building a platform as we just discussed. Our goal is to provide modular components that ride on top and build on top of and support multiple platforms. So whether you're on hyperscalers like Google or Amazon or Microsoft, or if you're using agentic platforms like LangChain or Azure Foundry or Bedrock, or you're using foundation models from OpenAI or Anthropic, it really doesn't matter for Boost, is and because our approach is agnostic of the platform, because we don't want to be yet another platform. Number one. Number two, the rate of innovation, the speed of innovation is so fast that what we've decided to do is essentially provide our clients with the IP, so that they own the IP of Boost once we implement the first solution, and then it becomes theirs, which means that they can open it up, they can look under the hood, they can evolve it as things evolve, as technologies change, and it's not a black box. That's the most important part. And that goes to your other question, which is around applications. First of all, there are many point solutions that are coming up that solve specific problems, but when you look at the transformation, like the way we imagine it and our clients want and need, you need to think at a broad kind of, and yes, of course, there's value in a point solution here, point solution there, whether it's for contact center or the member service space. The problem is that many of those solutions do not, it's like a black box in terms of AI. So you don't know what's going on. How does it align to your explainability? How does it align and help you in your compliance and meeting regulations? How does it help in your overall observability goals? Those are things that the industry is still working through in some ways, right? So that's there. Our approach is with the Foundry, give you the building blocks that you can open up. We can help you put them through in a factory model that can accelerate value. And as technology changes or the fundamental stack components change, that stuff can be evolved. And I think that's where a lot of our clients are seeing a different way of looking at things. They're very excited about our approach, by the way, because finally they don't want a black box, yet another black box, suddenly, sitting on top of, 20 different AI models. I have no idea how they're working. And then they're responsible for making sure that they comply to very stringent regulations in some ways. So, and many payers are also building capability. They're building teams that want to be able to move fast and be able to affect the possibilities that AI brings to the table. And everybody realizes, by the way, that the opportunity is incredible in terms of rethinking, rewiring these workflows. This is not something that we need to tell. It's not like we are arguing that. I mean, many clients already understand that. Many clients have been working on AI and using AI in its various forms for many years, decades. I mean, it's not like something this is brand new to them. We have clients who are smaller, mid-sized players who have teams of 30 or 40 data scientists and AI teams. They're pretty evolved, pretty mature, and they do understand that, the generative AI, space and the agentic space is bringing something to the table that can really change, the organization as a whole in a very fundamental way, in a very rapid way. So they're working to figure out how are we going to operate in that mode where we can actually deliver significant value 12 months from now, 18 months from now. What do we do today? How do we begin that today? And then, the conversation around Boost Foundry and our factory approach and our co-teaming and our co-development approach makes a lot of sense to a lot of our players. So
Yeah, I think we'd all be kind of weary of anybody who's promising that something is future-proof related to AI, because
right.
none of us can really predict where this is going if none of us can predict the next 2 to 3 years. But I think, one of the key points you're focusing on here is just that opportunity to have more control over what's happening to the code, to the application, to the foundation of what you're building, and the flexibility to kind of do with it what you need to as the technology develops. So as we kind of wrap up the conversation here, what do we think in terms of how people get started? I mean, you just said a lot of organizations already have in-house expertise. They've got their folks focused on certain elements of it. What are you advising healthcare leaders as they look at kind of what to do in 2026 and kind of really setting the foundation for what's to come?
Yeah, I think we are, so I think there's a couple of things that are happening quite a bit, right? So I think organizations that have strong AI teams are kind of starting to think about, well, what is that accelerated mode that I'm going to operate in, right? And you know, how do I kind of work with the business side to be able to drive that fast while we're still addressing the current challenges in all of that. So there's sort of this element of it for teams that, organizations that don't have a lot of AI investment. We are working with them to help them kind of think through, how they can begin their journey, and more importantly, how they can accelerate their journey. There's things like, of course, platform evaluations. Like there's a lot of platform thinking coming in healthcare, specifically for payers now, from an AI agentic platform capability. So where does this apply? When does it apply? How do we begin there? So those are some strategic thinking that we work and help our clients through. But I would say for most part, we're already in process with multiple payers at the national and regional level, where we are taking the doc type concept and are well underway in unlocking those. So if you are somebody that is thinking about, well, my focus on the right things, I'd welcome an opportunity for us to connect and have a chat and kind of give the teams a sense of, how do you unlock, what are those opportunities to unlock given the rule book unlocking that we're discussing so far.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right. Well, good discussion as always, Raheel. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Mike, having me.
And we've had a great discussion about Boost. If you want to learn more about Boost Health, you can go to boosthealth.ai or productiveedge.com. Both of the companies, those two hats that Raheel is wearing and balancing well as he's executing on both of these roles and helping healthcare organizations. We'll put links to the websites in the show notes as well. And of course, if you'd like to reach out to Raheel directly, you can find him easily on LinkedIn. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up today's episode of the Health Tech Edge. We thank everyone for listening. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe and like, comment, and share with a colleague. And we will see you next time on the Health Tech Edge.